I'm super excited today because we're starting a new podcast. And this is a podcast that has grown from a lot of thinking about how to make things more tangible and how to create a podcast that's about developer success. And who else should I invite for our first episode about developer success than Mr. API from ABN AMRO, Koen Adolfs himself, of course. Today I've got Koen Adolfs here with me, and we're going to talk a little bit about his story and how he at ABN AMRO worked to get to developer success for the team. And there's some really interesting things to share, and I'm very much looking forward to it. So hello, Koen. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for volunteering yet again. So we had a conversation, I think 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, and you said something really interesting then that really piqued my interest, and I was kind of like, okay, this is why Koen should be the first guest for this new show, and it was about like how you're approaching your API program. And but before we dive into that, I would like to ask very shortly for you to outlib, what does it mean for you to get to developer success? What is that? What is that inside of ABN AMRO?
Yeah, that is a big question, Kristof. It's asking me how to solve all the world problems. Developer success, developer experience, it's such a broad term, right? But the way that I describe it in my head, it can be twofold. So on the one hand, you have strategies, us as a company, us as a bank, and therefore you provide APIs and you want to succeed with those strategies. And then having developers attracting them to your products, your APIs, to get them into their applications means the world to be successful. So everything that a developer needs to be creative on your APIs, on your products, to integrate that into their applications and be successful for that, that will be developer success and therefore also company success. On the other hand, this is on the side of getting consumers to your APIs, to your applications. Of course, we also build applications ourselves, and we have internal developers as well. And their developer success is much more, how do you get the end-to-end developer experience of backends and APIs and front ends and everything connected in a complex company as where we work for and live in. How do you get that into a aligned and useful experience? That's often much more complex than getting consumers to your APIs alone.
I've started talking about it as the platform experience. It's like, how do you provide a platform for your developers? And then the external, I've talked about as an interface experience. So it sounds also that for you, the internal thing is about enablement and making it easier for people. And then the external thing, is that about getting a good value exchange, or what would you say?
If I look internal, then of course we have applications like internet banking, mobile banking, CRM systems, and those are then the front end applications. And we have large payment systems and all kind of security systems and loans and mortgages, etc. And those are very complex backends. And then you have all your cloud platforms and all your platforms in between, and all the processes to deliver software in that whole. And an API is then one part of that, of all the processes and all the software development processes that teams need to go through in order to deliver that API, but also in order to consume that API.
Yeah.
You have all kind of risk processes and boards and etc. So it's rather complex internally to deliver an end-to-end application. If you go externally, then you already have built that application.
Right.
And the API itself is that application. And the main thing that you then want to do is provide that API, market that API, sell that API in a way so that, yeah, it's getting successful attraction in the applications of third parties, that is very useful for them, that it creates value. So you need to have the right API with the right business logic, the right stuff in it, and then provide the support. But you don't need to develop the software itself anymore. It's up to the others to do so.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Makes sense. So it really, like, it really sounds like the external one is really is an API product, not just in the typical API product sense, which is about a certain mindset of how to deal with it, but it truly becomes a product.
Yeah, I agree, and that's also the interesting part. If you consider it like a product, then the complex part of developing your API on the external side is what's the need in the market, which problems do you want to solve, and there's a lot of business validation before you create an open API and sell that to the market. And if you have done your business validation in a proper way, yeah, the sales and the marketing and the attraction to your APIs, and therefore developer success, is more a natural flow.
Yeah.
Internally, it's much more, okay, we have a lot of spaghetti in the company, and we want to make that more flat, make that more logical, and therefore you want to provide the internal APIs, and those should offer a lot of business logic and to the right applications. Similar kind of processes, but other complexities come into play when you look at the internal world.
Yeah. I've actually started thinking that maybe internal APIs are not products, but they're actually they're platforms, or they should be platforms, and that it's actually a different mindset that is necessary to build internal APIs.
It's interesting to it's always interesting to have that conversation about what's a product. I also hear the words coming around, internal APIs are more micro products. So this, but platforms, micro products, it's indeed not a product where there is a earnings mechanism on it,
Yes.
or there are no direct customers on it. It are tools, Lego bricks that you use to build your own applications. And open APIs are much more products indeed, because then you need to think about the business value to third parties, to your own customers, their business case, and what is it worth for them to integrate, and where's also your own business model. And it's much more close to the definition of products, like products that you get in a supermarket as well, or a loan or a savings account.
Yeah. And linking that a little bit to the past of the program. So, like, because you were there, well, you're Mr. API. I don't know if you actually, if other people call you that, but for me, you're Mr. API at ABN AMRO. But REST APIs were not the first APIs at ABN. There were other. I'm sure there was lots of APIs in the infrastructure, maybe even towards customers. Probably already towards customers also. Like I'm sure there were some XML APIs with certain applications and stuff. But how far back does your history at ABN go? Were you there? Have you seen that time before the REST APIs truly?
I started to work at ABN AMRO in 2009. So that is, a while ago. And back then, APIs, application programming interfaces, it wasn't a term. And also, when I did deep dive into the topic, and that was because PSD2, Payment Service Directive 2 regulation from Europe, was coming into the industry. When I asked around what the abbreviation of API stood for, No one could tell me. Not even an IT person could tell me. And when I tried to steer the internal company more as a strategic advisor into generic capabilities, we always talked about generic capabilities, but the API, the term API was never around. When the company worked together with third parties and needed to expose some data, etc. Of course, there were mechanisms for it, but again, the term API wasn't around. It was really when PSD2 came into play where open APIs became a term, and we started to work on that for the regulation and later on also to develop real products. And before that, it was much more a IT term. So there was no connection towards business lines that were talking into APIs as a topic. That definitely has changed over time.
So, and you mentioned PSD2. This has been a huge deal for banking, not just in Europe, actually, also outside of Europe. The impact of it has been really big. How do you feel about the initiative? Has this made things better, or is this a work in progress, or what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so the regulation of PSD2, I think that Europe started to think about it in 2012, 13 for the first time, and then in the Netherlands it got implemented in 2018, 19. Us as a company started to invest in the technology for open APIs, external gateways, developer portals in 2015. We did the strategy. 2016 we started to invest into the technology. And I think for banks, the regulation, the biggest impact was that the banks were gaining new technologies. So open APIs before that. Of course, we had internal integration patterns, we had internal integration architecture, enterprise service bus, etc. But putting gateways in place for open APIs triggered a different kind of thinking in the company. First, to protect your APIs, but more and more it became an enabler to define new kind of products. While Payment Service Directive 2, the impact in the outside world. I'm not sharing my payment data to a third party every day. And I know that a lot of people around me are not doing that. So consumers are not automatically triggered by that regulation and the possibilities it brought. But for the companies, having that new technology in place, it definitely brought a new kind of thinking into the company, and new style of products and integration patterns as well. That is very fruitful.
Do you think that this is still going to change? I'll just say what I think, and then we'll see what you think about that. But this is a whole brouhaha about AI, and so I've got this theory that APIs are an enabling technology for AI. Right now, we have like narrative API that's super big, which is like making guesses about stuff. But that if you combine narrative AI with APIs or with AI that can generate applications on the spot to consume APIs, then you have the same kind of approximate quick answer, and let me look it up for you, that a typical person can do. Like humans also do that. They have some vague idea about what it probably is, and that might be as precise as what an AI might, or in some cases it might be as precise or maybe a little bit better than what an AI would generate. But then people will also go and look up authoritative information sources to verify that that they're right. Do you think, well, look in our crystal ball, do you think that maybe PSD2 is still in the making and that's the real value will still come later?
So from a regulatory perspective, PSD2 is not in the making. The regulation has been finished, and I see that Europe is looking into new regulations beyond this. maybe to align the interfaces of banks, or to improve the access mechanisms for customers. Also, we see that the corporate industry, where PSD2 was much more focused on the consumers, corporate industry is very interested in automating processes, and that's where we have our products as well. Yeah, I do think that there are big areas for payments developments in those areas. On the other hand, of course, with new technologies and the big developments lately on AI, also new ways of thinking get triggered in how things can be combined. I see the way chatbots, for instance, are developing lately, got a big push, and maybe indeed when you have your transaction data technologies in place, people can come up with new experiences in that regard as well. However, again, sharing your transaction data to everybody in the world is a different cup of tea. It's that privacy thing of transaction data, at least, is always in the back of the minds of people when sharing data. I do think that in different areas than the PSD2 area, it could be more comfortable to share your data, and also to use AI tools for it, than transaction data itself.
Makes sense. I got one topic I wanted to hear you out a little bit on the past, like where you come from. So because before you launched your API program and then also your developer portal, did you have any concrete goals that you wanted to achieve? And that might be both about your internal and your external developer portal. Did you have like a goal setting process or something like that, or certain goals that were handed to you from management, or how did you go about figuring out what success is going to look like?
Goals from management? Definitely management wasn't setting goals there.
Okay.
So for a lot of colleagues at the ABN AMRO, it was the ambition of being PSD2 compliant on the one end, launching the first developer portal as a major Dutch bank, being the first to the market. That was a personal ambition that I had, and I triggered that at a lot of other people as well. And with that, I also pushed towards management, like, oh, we need to go and we need to speed up. And it was much more a bottom-up push than top-down triggered back then. And also beyond that, triggering teams to start thinking about new business models and why APIs would contribute to their strategies. It was also bottom up in that sense. So Tiki is a payment request application that we had and have as a company, and we are rather successful with it, with about 8 million users right now. And we were looking into corporate business models or earning models for that, because we offered it to consumers for free. And it was our team that was triggering the Tiki team, like, you should move into this direction. Look into it. We are creating valuable capabilities. If you join, then we could do great things together. And it was much more that drive that helps a lot to bring the stuff to the market. And then having PSD2 in place, then of course also starting to think about business models and new API products, channels for corporate clients is a useful next trigger. So then we started to influence teams, like, this is a good direction to go to. Beyond that, I also see that we needed to invest in the corporate culture itself to move API first, to trigger these kind of thinking in different areas than payments alone. And in that regard, we started to invest into our API, into our internal API culture, creating internal developer portals, internal processes, gateways, etc. And where that might end up to in the future, I don't know yet, but it's at least putting a good ground layer in place for our own digital channels, and then maybe towards open channels in the future as well.
It was really an open book, and it's interesting that then maybe the one goal that you actually truly had was the being first to market. At least in the people that I talk to, ABN AMRO is kind of like a shining example, and the dev portal that you have. So you were able to be first to market and also be really a trendsetter, I think, and not just locally, not just in the Benelux, but actually globally. And I've heard other banks talk with, like, wow, this is really what we want. This is something like that we would like to get built. How did you get it right the first time? That's
Yeah, we didn't get it right the first time. So
okay.
the first time that we created the developer portal, of course, we looked into the developer portals of big tech companies, because those were mainly around, and you could get an impression on what the capabilities are that a developer portal should offer, and what developer experience is, and what the community could contribute, and what documentation should look like. But we had a small team, and we had only the regulatory point of view at the beginning, and we still needed to motivate the Tiki team to build their processes, and then which roles you should get internally, but also how the developer portal itself should work from a backend perspective as well. We didn't get that right the first time, so it's important to get started somewhere. And what we did was investigate the UX, what is the desired user experience, and from there on, we started to create the portal connected to the gateways, etc. Beyond that, we experienced like, it's taking us a long time to upload documentation, and these processes should be improved, and we want this kind of onboarding experiences and support processes needs to be improved. And the more you look into those kind of logical requirements, you also see that you need different roles like tech writers, and you need documentation pipelines, so you need to have a flexible content management system for your community managers to work with, and to create easy business pages. So actually, we created a second version of the developer portal only 2 years in, when we were in the journey, and that product is now quite stable. So I think the first iteration learned us a lot, what was good, but also what we could improve, and the second version was much better.
But even your first version was already a good was in the industry a very good
True.
launch.
True.
Yes.
That I can agree. And also listening to developers, what they would like, organizing hackathons, which was a big thing back then, was helpful to get that user experience right.
Okay. So let's bring it a bit more to the present. And I'd like to dig a little bit around developer success today, and how developer success is actually contributing to the purpose of the bank. So I went to look it up, and ABN AMRO's purpose is banking for better for generations to come. It's very inspirational. how is your API program today contributing to that mission? Is that already happening today?
So the principles that we talk about when it comes to APIs is that APIs can boost business because it prepares you for digital ecosystems and creativity and high velocity internally and externally. It helps you to untangle IT, build future-proof IT, and it also streamlines cooperation between teams and also between companies because APIs are digital contracts where you have logical provider and consumers and clear responsibilities in that regard. Banking for better for generations to come is how do you prepare for a digital world? So how do you do personal banking in a digital age? Topics like sustainability are very important. And of course, we have a big variety of customers and stakeholders, and all need to be connected to a bank and the services that we offer. If you merge all those terms which I just shared, boost business, streamline cooperation, untangle IT, and then if you talk about personal banking, digital age, so aligning customer experiences, untangling IT in that regard, it all connects. It all, and the one crucial person in that middle to bring it all together is that developer, together with the business developers, together with the product owners that need to come with the right business propositions and the right customer validations as well. But it is that developer that needs to build it and that needs to get the value out of that API, but also build the right API to give that value to the market or to other teams internally. And therefore, for me, banking for better for generations to come, and also the principles that we have for APIs itself, they really closely align, in my personal view.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So, and looking back at the dev portal or dev portals, how are they helping to achieve? Like, what kind of role do they play into that in making that happen, and also in achieving developer success?
So what we see, again, if I just make a distinction between the external developer portal and the internal developer portal that we have. On the external developer portal, we really see that we need to service developers of third parties with the right documentation and the right products. And it are especially the developers that are visiting our portals. We also see that we need to trigger different kind of roles, like the product owners, the CEOs, the CFOs of other companies, to think about what they could automate, and therefore that they are going to ask their developers to get to our APIs. And that's a different flow. So then you need to connect your developer portal to your main site and to get different kind of business content on your developer portal as well, to get all those third-party stakeholders, trigger them in the right way. So a lot of different kind of content that doesn't need to be all on your developer portal, but your developer portal needs to be a crucial connection between all of that. And internally, the developer portal is much more explaining to your teams also what are your company processes in developing APIs that are up to the high standards that we have. So what are all the standards, the guidelines, the review processes to develop APIs, but also if you have a solution intent where you want to consume one of those APIs, what do you then need to do? So the internal developer portal has a much different characteristic in that regard.
So you do some really interesting things on your external portal where you have like very detailed journeys for different people. As I said, you're doing a lot of things really well and really interestingly. So that's really good to see. I was blown away by your answer when I asked you, so like how many of your APIs are, and I think I used the word monetized. And your answer immediately was like, everything is monetized. And I believe that's very special because I think most organizations that I've talked with, they start with, okay, let's just get stuff online first. Let's try to get as many APIs as we can. And then we'll figure out how we're going to do something with this. But I have the feeling that, or actually, we already talked a little bit about it, but I have the feeling that you have a different approach that is triggering a very different outcome for the bank, for ABN AMRO. And basically, that's because everything is ideated as an API through product, that this kind of business outcome just comes by itself. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, how did you go about that? Like, what's the process and the practices that you're using in the organization to define what APIs you're going to put out there, and that then ensures that you actually have developer success or even business success from almost from day one with the products that you're launching?
Yeah, so the department that I work for is enterprise integration technology, and I also call myself lead product owner open banking and enterprise integration technology, which is basically stating that we are offering the capabilities to the business lines for the strategies that they want to accomplish. And what you often see happening in other companies is that, or indeed, they just put everything on the portal, all the integrations that they have, and say like, "Oh, we have a lot of integrations. That's nice." And we have those integrations as well, and also towards third parties, but they are not on the portal. Um, and the other area is that where a lot of companies are placing APIs as something as it should be innovation, and they put it in an innovation lab and they organize it away from the core business. And that's also why I tend to disagree with that. It should be the case, because it should go into the core DNA of your business line. So I personally am much more motivated to organize a central enabling capability where everybody can make use of for the strategies that they want to accomplish. So payments, markets with foreign exchange trades, and Tiki, they had clear ideas on, these are the business needs of my customers. This is how I can make it useful, and this is how I can create direct or indirect business models on top of the API products. And we have all the integrations as well, but they are not on the portal. And we don't organize it at group innovation, and therefore the teams owning the API products are part of the business lines themselves, are into the core DNA of the company. And I rather move more slowly because of that than speed, and more APIs, which is having a different exposure to the outside world, and as a result.
That's a very significant strategic choice, actually, because it alters the experience of the portal, because it means that because you have less APIs on the portal than other organizations, it's easier to discover them. There's less complexity in your catalog. Through reduction of complexity, it might actually be helping adoption because people can find the right API faster.
What I also find interesting is that I lately look at portals where we got inspired by when we started, and they had a lot of APIs on their portals. And they organize their developer portals in the group innovation.
Yes.
And now it becomes more the business as usual, and you see them trimming down the amount of API products that are in the portal. So all the innovative quick thoughts, not connected to the business strategy kind of APIs, got removed from their portals as well. So I also see a lot of portals, trimming down the amounts in that sense.
Interesting. So do you think, because that innovation aspect, that can also be interesting. Like at some point I used to tell people that if nobody's surprising you with what they're doing with your APIs, hopefully in a good way, then probably there's something missing, because it's the whole ideas of this enabling constraint that makes other things possible. Do you think that this focus on business line specific APIs is reducing some of the ecosystem innovation that might be happening, or you don't really think that's really the case? Or maybe you have another venue for doing that kind of stuff. Do people reach out to you for APIs that are not on your portal to build this kind of stuff?
No, so we do have a lot of business developers connecting to customers and to third parties, and we also have, of course, an innovation department which is looking into new propositions, and APIs might become part of that in the future as well. What you see is that those often are connected to the capabilities that we already offer, and therefore
Yes.
validate also useful API products in the future. I don't think it's really hampering the innovation part at this moment. Of course, I also would like to see a bigger thrive in the organization to have more APIs on the portal, as open API products are more deeply integrated into third-party ecosystems. But I also need to think more realistically, and I think that a lot of companies need to do, is that the API culture in a lot of companies internally are not in place. So if you don't have that in place internally, how can you be the right company on the external party to integrate with as well? And I do think that for certain areas which are showcased on the portal, we are well advanced in that area, and other departments of the bank still need to grow a bit.
I need to think about this part. That there's a very interesting insight there's a new one. Thank you for that. So, harking back a little bit to the developer portal, the business value of the portal today for your organization, and if it's fulfilling its goals. But as we said, it fulfilled its goal. You were first to market.
And we are compliant. So first to market, but also being compliant with regulation is a very important one at first.
Yeah.
And more, it is also to become successful with the commercial API products that we offer as well. And we do see that, for instance, the Tiki API is very successful in gaining business. So for the business account APIs and the markets API, so the foreign exchange trade API, we really see use cases where our customers create better customer experiences for their customers, and therefore we got sticky into their systems, and have new earning models because of that as well. So more and more it's about real business as well, but started with compliancy and indeed personal ambitions to be first.
Have the goals changed? Do you now have new goals that you have to fulfill?
For the developer portal itself, not, because as said, we are an enabling department, and we would like to offer all the business lines the possibility to move into this direction. Then the main goals that we can do is, how do you speed up the processes of creating an API, or of validating your concepts, of putting the documentation in place, to set up your support flows, and to improve your developer experience when teams are there to do so. So from a developer portal perspective, that is the main ambition. Us as a bank are definitely looking into together which digital ecosystems come around, which applications do we need to build ourselves? Where can we work better with third parties? And make those kind of steps and investigations. And then the developer portal is in the middle, but doesn't need new goals to surface that.
Yeah. So the developer portal is the interface for the interfaces.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you have any metrics that you're using to measure your portal, and maybe beyond just well, I guess you have the just analytics that you're using to analyze how many people are visiting your portal. Do you do anything else to measure the success of your portal?
Yeah, so of course we look at the amount of readers of our blog. We organize developer community events. We have the time that people spend on reference documentation or business documentation is could be a valuable metric. Of course, the amount of support questions that you get in to the individual teams and the time that they spend and the time that it takes to get answers to those support questions. That's much where we are looking into for a developer experience to validate that we offer the right APIs and that we are integrating into ecosystems in the right way, and that's growing. Then we are much more looking into the amount of API calls, the amount of applications, what are the types of customers that build those applications, and the earning models, direct and indirect business models of the APIs themselves are then interesting to follow.
And are there any metrics that you could like look at before your dev portal and then after your dev portal? Do you have anything like that? Like what kind of impact that this had on the business?
We didn't have open API products before. We had to develop. So I couldn't say that we were selling these kind of integrations before and after. So what I can see is before creating good content on the developer blog and after, or before and after events, or before and after the launch of a certain product, but not the developer portal itself.
When you start looking at the Tiki API, do I understand this correctly, that Tiki is a guest on the ABN AMRO developer portal, and that the Tiki team is its own business separately? Because there are certain processes that are happening off the developer portal, and then there's certain processes that are happening on the portal. Is that a good characterization?
Yeah. So as I shared earlier, I try to motivate the business lines within ABN AMRO to come up with their own propositions which are connecting to their strategies. And then at the central, we create one platform, one hub, one developer portal to make them successful, so that they don't need to invest in their own developer portals and security, etc., and their own processes. Tiki is a ABN AMRO brand. It's indeed a team fully under the umbrella of ABN AMRO, just like we have other brands like New10 for loans. And what I explained earlier is that you need to motivate different kind of roles towards the use of such an API.
Right.
And what we do, and that's also what we saw, for instance, on the developer portals of Meta, of Facebook. They also have various brands, and then they have the developer portal in the middle. But if you go to WhatsApp or Instagram or etc., you have business pages, and then you get redirected to the Meta developer portal. And that's also how we organized it around Tiki. Tiki can have business pages, business content to attract the business users, and then once the developers come into play, then they get redirected logically to the portal and the central processes that we have, just like we do for other products, the business account and the FX trade APIs as well. But those are then ABN AMRO brands, and there you navigate it from the abnamro.nl towards the developer portal. Just different experience then.
How do you navigate like the connection between these two and the handoff? Because also in your developer portal, you also have business pages about the API products that you're offering. How do you make the distinction between these two?
That is a interesting question, because what you see is that still APIs can be niche. So it's not that the whole company is thinking in API products and it's the core business. There are financial companies in our market, fintech, where APIs is much more in the core DNA of a company, and then the developer portal is getting a different position in that regard as well. So what we try to do with the developer portal is also to motivate certain kind of content which we think is valuable, and then over time, when the company grows, you see that that type of content is growing towards the more mainstream channels of ABN AMRO, and from there on you think about where is the overlap, or what's the logical position. But if you keep that business page quite light and you don't extend that too much, then it stays maintainable. And then from those business pages of the business lines themselves, there's a logical cutoff towards developer documentation. And the business documentation on the portal we keep quite light to make that handoff quite clear.
So it's like what the technologists would need to know to understand the business of the API. That's what you also put on the portal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And to give some inspiration on what you could build with it. But this is definitely an area that might change over the near future.
One of my pet peeves, and this is already starting to look towards the future, but one of my, well, it's not a peeve, it's one of my pet philosophies, or here comes the philosophy again, even though I said this was going to be about more tangible stuff. But I've seen some companies, like one example is KBC in Belgium. I've seen what I would say, or the way I describe it, is turning their API developer portal into an interface developer portal, which is basically saying, we're enabling developers, no matter if they're going to build API integrations or use a ready-made widgets or QR codes or whatever they're going to use to create a digital experience. Is this something that you've already heard people talk about, or how is that looking in the bank?
There are 2 points into that question. So which customers do you want to attract, and which type of customers, which type of people do you want to attract with your portal and the content that is on it? At ABN AMRO, we also have the Doorpakker platform. And at the Doorpakker platform, we offer a lot of solutioning towards SMEs to grow their businesses. That can be in the parts of cybercrime, or that also is connecting to Tiki, or all kind of services that an SME would need to get to the next kind of level, which is a bit broader than finance alone. So we already have that portal.
Yeah.
And getting all that documentation to the developer portal wouldn't make sense. So what we then try to do is, we have the Doorpakker platform, we have the ABN AMRO.nl, we have the developer portal. What are the logical entry points for all of those? And UXers always need to make a distinction between what's logical in that regard. Then again, talking about embedding finance or new kind of solutions or experiments with new types of content, putting that on the main page of ABN AMRO.nl is much more challenging than creating a page in the afternoon on the portal, for instance. So for experiments, it might be useful to go into that direction as well. It will grow over time. So I do think that developer portals, the way they look now, won't be the same in the future, but how they would look and how things would integrate and which components, for instance, could also move away from the developer portal into the main page, I don't know, but that will change over time, I guess.
Yeah, to me, it feels that developer portals are, the interface for the interfaces. So it's a structured way of declaring interfaces that an organization has. And at the heart of that, or at the foundation of those interfaces, there's probably APIs, either the API products you're exposing externally or the internal APIs that you've built, but it's this a more structured way of exposing what you've got, and a comprehensive way.
Yeah.
So that, and this is also why I think that looking towards a world with AI, this might become even more relevant and important, so that you don't have to go crawl your whole, all of your domains to figure out like what are the interfaces, or what are the ways that I can interact with your organization, but that this is something that is like exposed in a structured way. This is some of the things that I'm thinking about towards the future. What do you think, like looking in your crystal ball? We briefly touched a little bit on PSD3. How do you think this is all evolving? Where is it all going? I shared my vision for where I think developer portals will go. What are you seeing in the next couple of years?
Yeah, so I think all the concepts with AI is already quite advanced. What we see is that a lot of companies still need to learn the topic of APIs and the skills that they need to start thinking about what they could build and use with it. So we see companies like car companies that are using our APIs to automate their car sale processes, and they decrease the amount of time between the customer pays and when they are getting their cars. We see that travel agencies are automating how they do currency conversions, but each time it is a CEO or a CFO or a product owner, a project manager from such a company that need to think about, this is a process, or this is a struggle that we have, and this is something that we could automate. And then we also need to have a developer in place or a third-party company that can help us out to build that stuff and automate and maintain it. And we see that that is still a industry change that in many areas still need to happen. So get the basics right based on what we already have built is definitely something for the near future, for the Netherlands, for Europe to focus on.
Yeah.
From there on, when more companies learn those skills, have the skills in place, you will grow to next level topics like AI or etc. But getting the basics right is still a topic, I guess.
And isn't it possible that we're gonna leapfrog this? That we're just going to, that like even the laggards, organizations that have no concept of APIs, already today they're using APIs because it's the infrastructure on which a lot of our communication technologies and our digital infrastructure is built. If we start creating magical interfaces that give you those capabilities without having to build a structured, like predetermined way of consuming, wouldn't it be possible that tomorrow everybody's using APIs? They just don't know it?
Yes and no. So leapfrogging still means that someone needs to build that integration layer and that mechanism in between, right? So I automate my whole house and I connect everything to everything, and the open source community of Home Assistant is definitely the community that has been leapfrogging in how a couple of houses have been automating, and then how Apple, Google, and Home Assistant and on a lot of other companies are now working together on Matter and Threads. That is for the housing and smart housing is definitely leapfrogging into that area, and then it's much easier to combine chat GTP or whatever. That still needs to happen in a lot of industries.
Yeah.
So it's not one smart magical move and then
Of course.
and everything is fixed.
Yeah.
Someone needs to do that work.
Yeah. But I think getting your API program right, getting your API fundamentals right, is probably one of the smartest things you can do to prepare for that future.
That's definitely true. Because if you don't have APIs, I'm convinced that in the future, your company, like a computer that has no internet, you cannot connect to it, you cannot do anything with it. And a company without APIs is definitely a company that is not getting connected to that future in the near future as well.
Were there any things that stood out for you? Any ideas that were triggered by the conversation?
Yeah, so what stood out for me is that developer portals itself, we can talk about developer portals as portals, but I think that is also the ecosystem of websites that a company has that needs to work together. And you see that different companies come up with different solutioning. So they separate technical docs in a different website, and then you have business docs in a different website. And when you bring them all together into one developer portal, it creates both advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah.
You have the main websites. It's really the company characteristics reflects also in how those developer portals are created and how they are connecting. And I think that Conway's law is interesting in
Yes.
this sense. How do you organize your company for the desired outcome for developer experience and the desired portals in that sense as well?
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting how you talked about capabilities as the API products that are exposing certain capabilities. I think that's that idea of making those capabilities available to others that are interacting with you. Last question. Is there anything you would like to share with our audience?
Yeah, so ABN AMRO is moving into the API industry, and as such, we are definitely looking into new roles. So at multiple areas within the bank, we are looking into hiring people that are experienced in creating API specifications, reviewing specifications, creating API backends, technical writers. So yeah, definitely look at work at ABN AMRO, the website that we have. Also via our developer portal, you can reach out for the various roles. But definitely we are on a roll. So it's an interesting area to work for us.
And is it, do you have to live in a certain location to be able to work with ABN?
Yeah, that's often the case. So
Yeah.
being located within the Netherlands because of regulation makes things much easier to do so.
But if there's people that are looking to go live in the Netherlands, do you have programs to help people with that or something like that? Or
Yeah, no, we of course have a big HR office that can look into those kind of things. Of course, we also have indirect ways of working with intermediaries that can help out as well, if it's a temporary project, for instance.
yeah. Thank you very much, Koen. As always, it's a huge pleasure to talk with you and to exchange thoughts about where it's all going, and to hear the story that's still evolving. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This episode was brought to you by Pronovix. You can learn more about our company at pronovix.com. Thank you for listening. That's it for this episode.